Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today's telephone town hall with Congressman Jim Hagedorn. We're going to start today with a few remarks from the Congressman, and then we'll open it up to your questions. And to ask a question, please remember to press star 3. And with that, I'll turn it over to Congressman Hagedorn.
Well, thank you, moderator, and good afternoon, everyone. This is Congressman Jim Hagedorn, and thank you for joining today's telephone town hall meeting. We're broadcasting today from 325 Cannon House Office Building. The House is in session, so we're in Washington this week. Be back in the district tomorrow. But as we continue working to combat the COVID-19 pandemic and fully reopen our economy and our schools in a safe, efficient manner, I want to take the time to address your concerns and answer your questions about the issues that are impacting your daily lives. This is our 27th town hall so far in this Congress. I think we lead the Minnesota delegation in that. We did 21 town halls in person, one in each of the 21 counties in our district. And then this is the third telephone town hall, and we did 3 by radio. So I always enjoy these opportunities to connect up and talk about the issues and stay informed of what's on your mind. Just a quick background about the 1st District. It is the 21 counties, as I said, mostly all of southern Minnesota. Our district goes from the Wisconsin border to South Dakota, and then the Iowa border all the way across Minnesota up about 80 miles. So Rochester would be the largest city, Mankato and Owatonna, Faribault, Austin, those would be the larger cities in the district. Our district is really 3 main segments of our economy involve farming and agriculture, of course, small business and manufacturing, and medical care. Believe it or not, in Minnesota's 1st District, we have 100,000 jobs, direct and indirect, tied to medical care, 35,000 alone directly employed at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, and then we have fine rural hospitals across our district. So those are the 3 main segments of the economy that I've been paying particular attention to in this Congress, and especially during this pandemic since the economy went into pause with the COVID-19, and we're trying to get out of that now. So with that, I look forward to talking with you about many of the issues of the day. And moderator, if we have a call to get going, let's get right at it.
Our first question today is going to be from Mary, who has a question about schools reopening. Mary, you are live with the Congressman.
Yes. Hello, Congressman Hagedorn. Could you tell me what is happening with our schools? Will they open?
Well, hi, Mary. Thanks for the call. Appreciate you being on. I've been a little bit outspoken about reopening the economy and things like that in Minnesota. I thought Governor Walz had kind of dragged his feet and held on to too much of his emergency powers. I do believe the governor is going to make have a talk here in about an hour or so to address the schools. But my position is this. I think the decision-making on reopening schools should be left to the local officials, to the school boards and the parents, and that they can figure out ways to do things in a safe and efficient manner. I do not believe our governor should be making decrees and a one-size-fits-all on the schools, just like small businesses and everything else. Rural Minnesota, our district, is not the Twin Cities, and we don't need to be treated that way. We're more like some of our neighboring states, and I hope that the governor will enable our local officials, the school boards, and the parents to make those decisions. Thanks very much for your call.
Next, let's go to Robin in Faribault, who has a question about the Highway 14 projects. Robin, you are live.
Hello, Congressman Hagedorn. I want to thank you for taking a strong stand for us in Minnesota and using a common sense approach to our government policies. I do have a question about the Highway 14 project. As you know, it's extremely dangerous, and I just want to hear what is going to be happening.
Well, thanks for the call. I appreciate the kind words. But more towards where you live, there's a segment of Highway 14 that's under construction now. I just saw Senator Jasinski on the project the other day, and that project just starts in Claremont, that area, and goes to Owatonna. So that should be completed here in the next year or so. And that leaves just one more segment of Highway 14, to try to expand it from 2 lanes to 4 lanes that needs to be completed where we are. And that's over from Nicollet to New Ulm. And we are working in bipartisan fashion with all involved, the governor on down, all of the legislators, to make sure that we can secure the federal monies, the build grant. There's about $25 million up for grabs. And if we can get that money from the Federal Department of Transportation, then I think they're going to be able to complete that segment of Highway 14 over by New Ulm. It's very important because it's a safety issue. Unfortunately, we've lost lives on that stretch, and it's very much an economic issue. There are businesses that haven't relocated or opened up in New Ulm because of the transportation. Getting in and out is very difficult. And on top of that, it's a quality of life. We need to make sure that the folks in the rural areas have as good a quality of life as anybody else, particularly people in the urban areas. So for all those reasons, this is our top priority on transportation. Just a few weeks ago, I spoke with the Federal Department of Transportation Highway Administrator, Nicole Nason. We had a very good conversation. I've also spoken with Secretary Chow of Transportation, but I look forward to doing that again. This particular project is being reviewed now, and so it's important that we let them know how important it is. And we should have something by mid-September, and we know whether or not we can finally complete the Highway 14 corridor, which has been in the works for upwards of 50 to 60 years. So thanks very much for your call. I hope I answered your question.
Next, we'll go to Sherry from Rochester, who has a question about prescription drug prices. Sherry, you're live with the Congressman.
Hello, it's a pleasure to speak with you. I just was wondering, what can we do about the high price of prescription drugs?
So that's a very timely question. The President of the United States, Mr. Trump, signed several executive orders just this past week to attack the high price of prescription drugs and to have a more efficient system. Included in that is an idea that I've been promoting. As a matter of fact, I think I talked about it in each of our 21 town hall meetings, the concept that the American people should not pay higher prices for prescription drugs than people in foreign countries when it's U.S. manufacturers that are the ones putting these together. So I'll give you an example. If somebody in France pays $1 for a particular pill, and in the United States they're charging $2, well, that needs to be adjusted so we pay the same price, and that means our prices are going to come down and their prices are going to go up. That concept I refer to as one pill, one price, and that was part of what the President signed just last week. He also put in motion an executive order that the Republicans in Congress have supported quite strongly to make sure that we cap costs for chronic conditions, things like insulin that are used by people. That's going to help folks, especially our seniors. And then we get into other issues about something called pharmacy benefit managers, which are essentially middlemen that get in the way of your doctor and you and the prescription drug that you leave the pharmacy with. And a lot of times there are kickbacks involved, and they change the particular drug that you're going to receive. And so we're reforming that and get rid of those practices. And lastly, something that Congressman Gil Gutnick, who used to hold this seat, he's from Rochester, and he's wanted this for a long time, to allow the reimportation of drugs from countries like Canada, where they're much cheaper, and it's the exact same drug that's offered here in the United States. And so President Trump has signed that. So we're moving forward. There's a lot of innovative things that are going on by the President and Republicans here in Congress, including myself, to drive down the cost of prescription drugs, to make sure that they're available, and this is the important part, and make sure that the innovation in these therapies continues. The United States is all these companies are coming up with cures to keep people alive. I'm one of them. I happen to go to the Mayo Clinic for kidney cancer treatment, and the cure that I use was developed essentially it was approved by FDA just last year. And so we want to make sure that we continue those cures, and then we want to try to keep the prices down. So I'm very excited about where we are, and I think people are going to be very happy moving forward.
Just a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question to the Congressman, be sure to press *3. Next, we'll go to Roger from Albert Lee, who has a question about the Congressman's health. Roger, you are live.
Well, maybe we lost Roger. Are you there, Roger? Okay. Well, if he's calling to ask about my health, I'll just use this opportunity to give a little update to the folks out there. About a year and a half ago, I was diagnosed with kidney cancer, an advanced stage kidney cancer. I found out about it purely by accident. Went in for a routine physical, and before you know it, the doctor said, "Wow, we've got some serious issues here to deal with." So that's first and foremost why I tell people, if you haven't been to the doctor for a while, please make an appointment, have those routine physicals, those cancer screenings, and things like that, because if they're detected early or soon enough, it can save your life. So please do that if you haven't seen the doctor for a while. But since then I've been treated at the Mayo Clinic for about the last 18 months, and I receive immunotherapy, which revs up my immune system and helps my body identify and kill the cancer. And so far, in each of the tests that we've conducted since then, the cancer's gotten smaller and gone away, and I'm feeling great. I want you to know I feel great. I'm doing all my work. I haven't missed any votes in Congress due to illness. I'm here in Washington now. We keep working very hard. I get across the district. We're making stops in all the communities in our district, and we're just going to keep going. So I'll keep fighting cancer and keep fighting for the folks in First District. But I appreciate everybody's prayers and your concerns, and I just want you to know that we're doing well. Thank you.
Next, let's go to State Senator Mike Perry, who has a question about the Mission Act and the 48-hour rule. Senator Perry, you are live.
Hey, Congressman, great to talk to you today.
Hey, Mike.
So I just, I started reading through this, but it's got to be exciting, and I'm just kind of wondering if you could give us a layman explanation on what it means about Mayo signing on to the Mission Act.
So, Senator Perry, I appreciate the question. It's great to hear from you. And as a veteran yourself, we commend you and all the veterans for the service that you provided to our country. And, you went out and you earned and you deserve benefits from the American people, including to have timely quality medical care. So several years ago, Congress decided that it's about time that veterans have an option other than VA to go get good medical care. And sometimes the veteran couldn't drive long distances or just needed to see a local doctor or want to go to a local hospital. So we started to make that more available. Recently, last year, they upgraded that with what's called the Mission Act, and it's even provided more opportunities for veterans to go out of network and to see their own doctors and hospitals. But not every medical care provider has participated in that. And but we are very excited, as you said, that on August 1st, the agreement will be signed between the Mayo Health System and the VA so that our veterans across southern Minnesota and elsewhere will be able to go to the Mayo Clinic health facilities for their routine and other medical care. So it's really quite something. It's taken several years of negotiations. I'd like to commend Joe Steck, who does our veterans outreach in our office, for being a big part of that. And I'd just like to thank Mayo Clinic and the VA for all the work that they put in. But we're with our veterans 100%. You deserve the finest quality medical care in the world, and that's offered here in southern Minnesota. And so we just couldn't be happier.
Next, let's go to John from Worthington, who has a question about the requirement of masks. John, you are
Good
live.
afternoon, Congressman.
Hey, John.
My question is, what is your position on the use or the requirement of masks?
So I think that the mask policy should be individual Minnesotans making decisions for themselves, along with private entities. Obviously, if businesses wanted to have masks, worn and so forth, they have that right. But what I don't like is that our governor is using emergency powers to have a one-size-fits-all policy for the whole state of Minnesota. And what might be good for parts of the Twin Cities or urban areas or where there's a hot spot might not be so good here in the rural areas. At least I think people should have that choice. I guess I could use this as another reason to talk about some of the other things that I haven't been real happy about when it comes to reopening our economy based upon the governor's decision-making. He far too often has treated rural Minnesota, like southern Minnesota, like it's the Twin Cities. and we're not. We have lots of different situations, and we're more like our neighboring states. And to give you an example, South Dakota has been wide open the whole time. South Dakota is going to have all their schools open with no masks, and per capita, they have a death rate of 33% of Minnesota. Minnesota has 77% of our deaths, unfortunately, in long-term care facilities. And I think instead of going around and trying to protect the healthy and people who are younger, who have a very, very, very high survival rate from COVID-19, somewhere 99.9 something percent survival rate if you're under 60 years old. We should be doing a better job, and the governor and everybody, of protecting those most vulnerable, because every life matters, including those of our elderly. So other things, the churches, at one point, we can only have 10 people going to church outdoors, no singing. I mean, these things were just arbitrary decrees, and it really should have been worked out with the legislature, and it should have been more of a private matter. So I hope I answered your question, and I appreciate you bringing that up.
Next up is Tony from Mankato, who has a question about defunding the police. Tony, you are live.
Hi, Congressman. I'm glad that you're doing well. What's your opinion on some of the cities that are actually defunding the police departments?
Well, Tony, thanks for the question. I think you know my answer. I'm not looking to defund or defang the police. I want to defend the police, and I appreciate our law enforcement officers who protect and serve our communities day in and day out. They do it honorably. They're stand-up people, and they deserve our support and our admiration. And I always tell the folks that I see, whether it's the sheriffs and their deputies or the police chief and the officers, whoever I see, I always tell them, we've got your backs. And I think that's a sentiment all across southern Minnesota. The people I speak with don't like this defund the police nonsense or making them stand down and not do their jobs. We saw how tragic this is in our own state. In Minneapolis, that city was allowed to burn down for 3.5 days before the governor and that mayor got the National Guard in there and quelled it. And mostly it's because the police were not allowed to do their jobs. They were told to stand down. They lost 1,500 businesses. We had all sorts of people who were hurt. You know, that they were not, unfortunately, the police were not used by the mayor and the governor to go in there and protect people and property. And in all that chaos is about $500 million worth of damage where they need to rebuild. You know, the 3rd precinct was taken over for all intents and purposes. And then we saw that stuff spread across the country. Had they handled their business up there and let the police do their jobs and everything, we might not be having some of the chaos we're seeing in America's largest cities today. But then Governor Walz sent the federal government a bill for $500 million. And President Trump was right to say no, not one penny from federal taxpayers. That was my position. And I don't think Minnesota taxpayers should pay for it either. That's the city of Minneapolis that let that happen. They should deal with it. I feel bad for the small businesses and others, but the city of Minneapolis was the people that were overlooking that, and they let the people down. So we support our police, and we want them to be able to go out and do their jobs. Recently, Speaker Pelosi brought up a bill that would have a liability standard for police officers that would make it so virtually nobody would ever be a police officer again. I spoke with Chief Hunsley down in Mapleton, and he told me flat out that he'd have to consider quitting if that thing ever went through. That's how terrible of a position that is. So we're going to keep voting right on that, defending our law enforcement officers, and I just want to again reiterate how much I appreciate what they do for us. Thank you.
And just another reminder, if you'd like to ask a question for the Congressman, press *3. Next, Sam from La Center has a question about corporate liability shields. Sam, you are live.
Hello, Congressman. I have a quick question. I know the corporate liability shield is currently a sticking point for Republicans in a bill meant to help the American people and businesses. And I'm curious of why this is a must on a bill that is desperately needed for the country.
So if you're talking about, I think, sir, about the next coronavirus relief package that they're beginning to negotiate here in the House and the Senate, and in that package will be hopefully monies for our farmers who have really been hit hard in the last few months, especially our livestock farmers in southern Minnesota. They're looking at some monies for schools and for other issues. one of the provisions, you're correct, that Republicans, including myself, believe has to be in that bill is a reform, essentially, that will not hold our businesses, business owners, and schools liable for people who may contract or think they contracted COVID-19 while in their establishments. And I think if we don't have that in there, some people are going to be very hesitant to open their doors and perform commerce. It's going to be tougher and tougher to get people to go back to work, and I think that just has to be in there. I think for me it's common sense. There's another provision that I think needs change, and that is the Democrats had a provision that an unemployed person would receive $600 per week unemployment in addition to their regular unemployment, and that has us where people are not working and effectively receiving $22 an hour for not working. And in most instances, that's more money than they'd make if they were working full time. So this is not fair for the people who are working full time, and it certainly isn't good for businesses because it's going to be hard to get people to go back to work if you can make more money not working. Did I answer your question, or did you have a follow-up? I guess I lost it. Hey, let me just reiterate. You're on a telephone town hall with Congressman Jim Hagedorn. This is Jim, and I really appreciate you joining today. This is our 27th town hall across southern Minnesota in one form or another. We're talking today about how to combat the COVID-19 pandemic and fully reopen our economy in a safe and efficient manner. That also applies to our schools, and I always appreciate the time that you've given me to address your concerns and answer the questions and discuss the issues. So with that, moderator, is there another question in the queue?
Yes. Next we have Mike from Laverne who has a question about small businesses. Mike, you're live.
Hi, Jim. We pray for your health nearly every day. I just want you to be encouraged.
Thank you, Mike.
The question I have has to do with small businesses. Now, under this COVID-19 has really wreaked havoc all across this nation, and especially here in southern Minnesota with the governor that we have. So my question is, what can be done to help small businesses? And when I'm talking about small businesses, I'm not talking about the federal government's idea of a small business, 500 employees. I'm talking about the small businesses, one employee, the owner, or 10 or 20, 30, real small business. What can be done to help us?
So, thank you, Mike. It's a good question. It's a good point. First of all, those types of businesses also include our restaurants, which have been just devastated. And I don't know a model where a restaurant can be open 50% and make money. It just doesn't really work. And what we have to do is get our economy fully reopened. And I think in southern Minnesota and in rural areas, we can do that in a safe manner. And, we're not like the urban areas. I think we can do that. South Dakota has proven that they can do it in a lot of their areas, even Sioux Falls, which is a city of much larger than Rochester, which is our largest city. We had the Paycheck Protection Program, which was very helpful to help our small businesses retain employees. Because once they reopened, we didn't want them to have to go out and recruit talent. We wanted them to get started again. And I've spoken with numerous small business owners who said that the Paycheck Protection Program was a good thing. It allowed them to receive a loan, and then if they used the money to pay back their employees and to maintain operations for their business, that loan converts into a grant. And so we're looking at that in this next round of coronavirus relief. Should we expand that a little bit? Should we tweak it? Should we offer it up? Because there was about $135 billion that was not dispersed. I mean, pretty much everybody who wanted the money received it, but then there are people like in the hospitality industry, restaurants and others, which probably still in need. I was also able to work with Congressman Pappas, who's right next door to me here in the Cannon building. He happens to be a Democrat, and I'm a Republican, but we worked together to have the employee retention tax credit, which is something that's been of use to a lot of small businesses. We're looking at maybe expanding that. At one point, we did tie the two together, and you could use that tax credit along with Paycheck Protection Program. That was a good thing. But what has happened in Minnesota has been kind of criminal in this respect. Our small businesses were forced to stay closed while the big box stores were open. That alone was not good. It didn't make any sense out in our rural areas. And then in places like Laverne, where you're calling from, our stores were closed and people simply drove across the border into South Dakota and did their shopping, went to restaurants and things like that. It had a devastating effect on our businesses, particularly in the border communities. And I just thought that was a bad policy. I stated it for the record publicly and privately with the governor, and I maintain that it was a bad policy. So I hope moving forward we can do better and we can compete more with our neighboring states, because South Dakota probably has the strongest economy in the entire country right now, simply because it didn't close down. They just kept going. Did I answer your question if you're still there? I guess you hung up. Okay. Moderator, next question, please.
Let's go to Mary from Rochester, who has a question about free speech issues and big tech. Mary, you're with the Congressman.
Good afternoon, Congressman. Thank you so much for doing this and taking my call. My concern really is more about two questions. Mail-in voting, where do you stand about that? I'm extremely concerned about the use of mail-in voting. I've worked as a poll worker for many elections, and I don't see that's necessary. I think it can be safely done if we need to at that time in November. I just heard briefly on my car radio, the reception wasn't really great, but they had a primary in New York using mail-in voting, and it's disastrous. There in that they have not been able to clarify the results. So I'm interested to know what your stance is on it, and if you're a proponent or against it, and how you are going to, what if anything you're going to do about that to protect voting integrity. And then the second point or question really is about free speech, in that I see the social media grossly obliterating or trying to obliterate our freedom of speech. I understand that Senator Josh Hawley from Missouri has a bill out there. I don't know if anything has come of it, in which it's addressing the different, I don't know if he's got a bill yet or not, but he's questioning at least why social media has a certain tax favored status, if you will, because they are a platform versus publishers, since publishers would be subject to. Okay, you know where I'm going.
I think
okay.
I've got it. Well, thank you, Mary. I appreciate the questions. Very thoughtful questions. On the voting situation in Minnesota, we have the most liberal voting rules in the whole country. We have no excuse voting by mail. But one of the things that's important there is when you request a ballot, you have to have a witness sign that and send it back in. What's going on here with Steve Simon, the Secretary of State, is they waived that for the primary, and we can't let that be waived for the general election. We need to have a witness if you're going to vote by mail. There are some opportunities there, for the things to get lost or misplaced in the Postal Service, and I don't know, but we have mail-out balloting in some of our rural areas, and for the most part, it's worked okay as long as you have to have some of those controls like the witness signature. What I don't want to see is the concept of having universal mail-out balloting where they send everyone possible who could vote a ballot, because you're going to get a lot of people who are going to get extra ballots at their address because people have moved and things of that nature. We need people to register to vote, and we need to know who's voting. The other thing in Minnesota is we have no excuse early voting. People can go to the polls weeks and weeks before the election when there's really nobody around. And so if you're worried about safety and concern for that, you pretty much can be assured that it would be like going to the grocery store or something else as far as having people around to vote early. And then I think the vast majority of the people in southern Minnesota will have no problems getting out and voting on Election Day. That's the way that I do it, and I would encourage everyone to vote. Please vote in the primary August 11th, and then please vote again on Election Day for the person or persons of your choice. As far as the free speech issue is concerned, yeah, there's a lot going on. I just had a pretty good hearing, I think yesterday, with Facebook and people like that, and we're looking at it. You're right. They say because they're a certain category, platform, rather than being a media outlet and things like that, they have different standards. We should revisit that. If they're going to go around and essentially censor folks for things that they think are wrong, then maybe they have to have a different standard. But they're getting pretty big, and they're getting pretty powerful. And in the history of our country, when companies have become big and powerful and too influential, the government has looked into ways in order to break them up and to make them more competitive. So we'll see where that goes, and we'll keep following that. But there is an important issue, and it's one that we'll continue to monitor. Thanks very much. Appreciate your call.
Next, let's go to Douglas, who has a question about rural hospitals. Douglas, you're live.
Doug, are you there?
Lost.
Okay. Well, if the topic is rural hospitals, I think I can just pretty much give an update on where we are. We are in Minnesota, southern Minnesota especially. We're very fortunate to have some of the finest rural hospitals in all the country. They offer up high-quality medical care. And, for instance, in New Ulm, where I just visited not too long ago, they have the #1 rural critical access hospital in the entire country. And then there are other independent hospitals like Blue Earth, where I visited, and Medelia, and others. Really, really incredible institutions. When the pandemic hit with COVID-19, the hospitals were effectively ordered to close and couldn't do elective procedures, and that's where they make a lot of their revenue from. And our rural hospitals were in a tough spot economically going into that and didn't have a lot of cash in reserves. So because of that, Congress appropriated about $100 billion for our hospitals, and I made sure I worked with 34 other legislators and led a letter that was sent to Health and Human Services to the Secretary, Mr. Azar. And what we said in that letter is, let's make sure that our rural hospitals receive a proportionate amount of the money. It can't just be going to all the bigger hospitals, which are fine institutions, but we need to make sure the rural ones don't go broke. And we led that letter, and they conformed with that. And because of that, a lot of monies have been sent out to our rural hospitals that are keeping them going to try to make up for the lost revenue when they had to shut down. Some of our rural hospitals have also used the Paycheck Protection Program and other means in order to keep going. So that's what this is all intended to do. And the reason I'm so committed to making sure that we don't have rural hospitals that close and that we can keep our reimbursements to them up as best as possible is because not only do they provide timely quality medical care to folks in rural areas, and if one closes down, you have to go long distances sometimes to get medical care. That's important, and we appreciate what they do. But in many instances, they drive the economy and are the community's largest employer, one of the largest employers. So from an economic standpoint, it's really devastating to our communities when they lose their hospital. So for all those reasons, we're going to keep fighting for them, and I think things have been going the right direction there, and we're going to make sure that we protect them.
Next, let's go to Mark who has a question about unemployment benefits. Mark, you're live.
Yes, thank you, Congressman Hagedorn. You answered it earlier for me, and I appreciate that. I just hope that they look closer on the unemployment compensation fund. I know there are a lot of two-income families that have high income, and one of the persons is part-time, but they're making that $600 a month, and I shouldn't say they don't need it. They really don't. I think that's money they should be could put elsewhere, or if you do continue that there should be guidelines and look at the total income of a family before that $600 is just given to everyone. So I hope they really look at that. Some people definitely need it. Some people that don't need it are getting it.
Well, thanks for the call, and I understand where you're coming from. I think that's pretty much my position. But sometimes when Congress tries to do things and want to be helpful and make sure people can get through, there are unintended consequences. And in this case, there are quite a few people, the majority of people now on unemployment, because of the $600 extra per week, are actually making more than they would in their full-time job. So that is quite a deterrent to get folks back to work. It's really tough on our businesses, and frankly, it's tough on our communities and for the tax revenue base of places like Rochester. We need people employed and back in the workforce, and we want to have a strong economy. I can tell you this. If this call were 4 months ago, I would be talking about, or 5 months ago, I'd be talking about the demand in the economy was so strong. We maybe had the strongest and best economy in our lifetimes, that the only complaint from businesses is they couldn't find enough workers. And even our farmers were optimistic again. They were seeing the implementation of our trade deals, the United States, Mexico, Canada Free Trade Agreement, USMCA, which I championed from like the first day in office, because I felt like if we could get the trade deals moving in the right direction, that would be the best way to help our farmers and move our economy. And then we had phase one with China, Japan. We've got deals pending with Great Britain, Vietnam. The Korea deal was important, and India, where they might buy 1 billion gallons of our ethanol. And the farmers were like, hey, this is starting to look good. The ethanol program was being worked out the way Congress intended. And then on top of that, they looked at what was going to be a good growing season. And it's been a great growing season. The crops look fantastic in southern Minnesota. But we have to get the demand back. And that means getting people back to work, getting people back in the restaurants, getting people traveling again. And I know we have to be cognizant of COVID-19. We don't want to see anybody pass away from that. But we can do it in a safe and effective manner, particularly when you look at the risks for people under 60 versus those a little bit older. And I think we can do it, and I hope we will. I'm going to keep promoting our small businesses and our restaurants, rally for them as I go into the communities, and we're going to continue to have policies, I think, that are going to be good for everybody. So thanks very much for the call. Hey, this is Congressman Jim Hagedorn, and today we're having a town hall meeting by telephone. This is our 27th town hall meeting, and as we continue to combat the COVID-19 pandemic and fully reopen our economy and our schools in a safe and efficient manner, I just wanted to take this time to address your concerns and answer your questions about the issues that are impacting your daily lives. So thank you very much for being with us. Moderator, do we have another call?
Yes, let's go to Joyce from Spring Valley, who has a question about Social Security and Medicare. Joyce, you are live.
Good afternoon, Congressman. My husband and I are strong Republicans, love Trump and love you. And we have a major concern about Medicare and Social Security. My husband gets anywhere from 7 to 30 different letters every day from different organizations, where they keep saying the Democrats and the socialists are trying to pull away and not give Social Security and Medicare. Congressman, what is your stance on this?
That's an interesting question. I mean, so here's the thing. Whenever it comes up about Social Security and Medicare, first of all, I support the folks that are receiving from those programs, and that they have to be maintained. A promise made is a promise kept. And that's the way it's going to be. And any reforms to those programs, whether outlined by Democrats or Republicans, we need to do it together and take the politics out of it. We have to quit using Social Security and Medicare as a way to bash the other party, and make sure that we're being responsible to the American people. Recently, I was honored by the group with Healthy Seniors who wanted to say that they thought what I was doing for Medicare and keeping that going, making sure that senior citizens had access to quality medical care. They gave me an award for that, and I appreciate that. But, we're all in this together, and it needs to be a bipartisan issue, and we should take the politics out of it. To be quite honest with you, I do not know of any programs or policies by the Democrats in Congress to gut those programs. There would be probably an argument made that if some of their policies were to go through, we would have less money for them. But I don't believe either side of the aisle has any intention to harm Social Security or Medicare as we know it.
Next, let's go to Levon, who has a question about the Black Lives Matter movement. Levon, you're live.
Hi. Don't you think they're taking the Black Lives Matter a little bit too far?
What do you mean by that, ma'am?
Okay, like doing all the protesting and all that stuff.
Well, as far as the right to protest, I mean, everybody has that right to go out there and do it in a peaceful fashion. In some places, you need permits and so forth from the communities to go out and protest. I don't know anybody that has a problem with that. It's when some of the protests have turned into riots, as we've seen in a lot of cities across our country. Seattle, for instance, obviously Portland, where they've had, I think, 60-plus days of rioting, and they're trying to take over a federal courthouse and burn it to the ground, and a courthouse that has something like 80 federal law enforcement officers inside of it. And then what we saw in Minneapolis, I mean, there wasn't anybody in the country who thought that the police officer in Minneapolis did the right thing. In fact, just the opposite, and they're very pleased that he's looking at perhaps life in prison or a jail sentence that would be, that tough. But when the protests turn into rioting and you lose 1,500 small businesses and people are being harmed physically and other things, that can't happen. That needs to stop. And I don't care what group is behind any of it. It needs to stop. And we need to enable our law enforcement officers to go out there and do their work. But in many of these big cities that are run by people from the other party, I just have to say that, the police are not allowed to do that. And unfortunately, we're seeing the consequences of that. And also where they've moved to start defunding the police or not letting them do their jobs, like in Minneapolis and New York and other places, we're seeing spikes in crime and lots of people having to move out of those cities, maybe to rural areas like ours. Maybe that's not such a bad thing, but we're seeing spikes of crime, which are really hurting people, and it's terrible. It's just a shame. And I hope that those leaders of those cities will start doing the right thing, but so far that hasn't happened.
On that, my next question is, why can't
Are you there? Moderator, I think
sounds like we must have lost LaVon. Let's go to Paul from Rochester next, who has a question about the state and federal response to the coronavirus. Paul, you're live.
Yes, good afternoon, Congressman.
Hi, Paul.
Just some thoughts and thinking in terms of the federal and state relationship and also the local relationship of cities and counties, and particularly counties, as their role of a provider of services, and as things become more stressed, and we know that there's been a lot of challenges this year and they're only going to continue to grow, to be very careful as to how we carry out our relationship, and again, especially with counties as a provider of services, so that they're going to be able to be a working force in our economy. In many cases, county governments are perhaps even the largest employer in your county. So there's many roles that we play from cradle to death, so to speak, in all the human services and the public health services that are so essential. This is more of a request to keep an eye on those.
Well, I appreciate that. And, there's lots of ideas of what should have been done or could have been done different, but when you look at the way this was not contained in China, that's a big problem. And China lied to the world through the World Health Organization. And if we had been able to be summoned, all the countries of the world, to help them contain it there, we might not be experiencing what we're experiencing now. I thought what the president did in making sure that we shut off travel to China and other countries early on, he was ridiculed by the other party about that, but he did the right thing. His instincts were right. And as we move forward, obviously, you're never going to do it exactly perfect. I think everybody's trying to do the right thing, but we just have to stay at it. We want to protect the health and security of the American people, but we also have to make sure that our economy is open and firing, because without that, it's there's a lot of deaths, unfortunately, on that end when people suffer economically and don't get the proper, for instance, medical care treatment. When we shut down the hospitals, there were people that did not receive routine medical care, that instead of being treated for something and survive, that they will pass away from it, or they'll have lifetime health implications. We've talked to many of the medical systems about that particular issue. So there's always things on both sides. But thanks very much for your question or your comments, and we'll keep at it.
Next, we have Brittany, who has a question about rural broadband. Brittany, you're live with the Congressman.
Good afternoon, Congressman. So my question is, basically during this time of so many people working from home and students having to complete their homework online, and internet in the country and rural areas, especially southern Minnesota, is incredibly slow and unreliable. How do you plan to address issues of internet equity and availability in our district?
So you're exactly right, and the whole pause in the economy and having kids, learn over the internet and do their schooling there has really exposed this as we knew there was a problem. So rural broadband is a priority. I don't know anybody in Congress that doesn't, even the folks in the urban areas, they all want to make sure that the people in the rural areas have the same opportunities. It's an infrastructure issue. We have the Agriculture Department and others that have been putting out grants and things of that nature to expand our broadband services to the rural areas. And it's not just making sure they have broadband, but it has to be the higher quality that you can do 2 or 3 or 4 main things at a time. Do your farming, do your education, watch a video, whatever. It can't be one at a time and have inferior service. So there's a group of us that are looking at, should we take the monies from Washington and send it back to the states as a block grant, and let our state and local governments work together in order to get the broadband monies to the right spots and expand services as quickly as possible. But in general, I can tell you that I'm 100% supportive, that it is an issue. It needs to be done. There are some providers that have stepped up and done the right thing. Again, I was in Medelia not too long ago. I spoke with the communications company there, Christensen. They're good people, and they had stepped up to provide broadband to all the families in need that didn't have it because of the education that needed to be done that way. So, I applaud providers like that and others across the district that are working on the issue. But believe me, we are 100% in support, and I agree with you totally. Thanks very much.
Next, we have a question from Brian from La Crescent about beef farmers. Brian, you're live with the Congressman.
Hi, Congressman. I kind of got a two-part question here for you. So first part is, what help is there going to be for the farmers? I'm talking about the small farmers. We're a small family farm that's been farming this land here since Minnesota became a state. We have 150 head of beef cattle, and since this pandemic, the only two things have gotten cheap or prices dropped is the price of beef and the price of fuel. Everything else is sky high in price. Right now, we're trying to keep our heads afloat above water and not drown. And the second is, it's a biofuel, like biodiesel that we got in this state. You can ask any farmer that farms during the winter, and they all tell you that we have nothing but problems with biodiesel. With it gelling up and all. What's your plans on helping the beef farmers with the cattle prices and then also with the biodiesel?
Well, thanks for the questions. I appreciate you being out there on the front lines every day providing an array of quality choices to the American people when they walk into the grocery stores. It's quite something. We have a food supply that is the envy of the world, and we have to make sure that we keep it going. And one of the ways that we have to keep it going is sustaining farmers just like you, independent operators, so you don't sell out, because when you sell out, you'll sell out to larger operators, and they're not bad people, but it means fewer people working the land, living on the land, living in our rural communities, going to our Main Street businesses, and having kids in school. And so that's why sustaining agriculture and our farmers is just really the top priority of this district as far as I'm concerned. So when like I said, before the coronavirus situation and the pause in the economy, I think a lot of farmers were getting optimistic again, and then this hit, and it's been tough. As soon as the coronavirus situation started, they shut down the restaurants, which dropped, as you know, the demand for the finer cuts of beef, pork, and other livestock. And when that happened, the futures prices went through the floor along with that. And then we had packing plant disruptions and closures, and all told, we're probably looking at a need of about $20 billion to make sure that our farmers are sustained, and it's a lot of money. And I know you guys don't normally even want the money. Pork farmers, for instance, and we're number 2 in the whole country in pork, they never come and ask for money. But in this case, this is through no fault of your own. You had nothing to do with this. This just happened to you, and we have to make sure that you're sustained. If we lose our independent farmers, as I said, we're in bad trouble. So I put in a couple of bills on the pork side, but we're working also on the beef and cattle side to mitigate the damages. One of the bills that I introduced is for the hog farmers that had to go out and euthanize their animals and not even use the meat for the food supply, to have $1.5 billion to mitigate those losses and make sure that the farmers were properly compensated for that. And then as farmers had to sell into a depressed market, because like I said, there was no demand there through the restaurants, and that would include, of course, pork and beef, especially in our district. When you sold into that depressed market, you'd have your losses would be mitigated there too. So all told, for like I said, for pork, it's about $6.5 billion. For everything, probably about $20 billion. I do believe we're going to get most of that in the next coronavirus relief package, and then there'll be a replenishment of the Commodity Credit Corporation. I have asked the Secretary to consider a third round of market facilitation payments based upon trade disruptions due to the coronavirus and also the trade negotiations. So one way or the other, we are promoting the heck out of making sure that our farmers are taken care of. On the biofuels side, and I'll get to your other question here in a second, but the demand for gasoline, the demand for energy is way down because of the pandemic. That's really had an effect on our biofuels providers here in the district. We have 2 biodiesel and 11 ethanol plants, and so we want to make sure that our crop farmers and others are taken care of in this package as well. As far as the issues on gelling up with the biodiesel, I've heard that from some farmers in the past, but I have not heard that recently. I thought that the upgrades that they'd made in the biodiesel community, and I've spoken with them about this at length, that things were better. Perhaps with older equipment, it can be still a problem. I'd have to look into that more, and I will follow that up with them. But we have to make sure that if that's the case, then of course there can be exceptions, and you wouldn't have to use those products. But in general, I haven't heard many of those complaints. If you're still on the line, do you have any follow-up or anything else?
The other question I have too is for like us small farmers, it's hard to find a bank that's willing to work with us. You got to search all over the place for a bank that would be willing to loan to us because we're such a small farm, and trying to make bank payments on time and trying to, like, for example, we got a place in Caledonia we get our feed from and stuff, and in order to pay our bills, we got to sell our calves, but you know how it works. When bills pile up, you get to a certain point. Well, then they say, "Well, sorry, we can't give you no more credit. It's cash only until you do something with your account." Well, we can't do something with our account if we don't have the money coming in, and we don't have the money coming in when the prices are so cheap for cattle. The price is high in the store, and
So in your situation with cattle, you can do things a little bit different than hogs because the hogs are kind of on a conveyor line, and once they get to be 280 pounds or so, they need to go to market or it won't work out. But even if you can kind of put your cattle out to pasture a little bit and work around that, you still have cost to feed them and other costs on your farm, and then the income's not coming in. I would hope that the farm credit system and the banks would be understanding right now. They know that we're working on this. We've been very much in communications with them to say, let everybody hang in there because help is coming. And so I would hope they do that. If you need something more specific, I'd ask you to call our district office. We'll leave that number here in just a second, and or contact us, and we'll do everything we can to hook you up with the right people and help you out.
Yeah, sure. I'd like that number. You get a chance.
We'll give you all the information in just a second on the way out of this thing. But for your purposes, our district office number 507-323-6090. 507-323-6090. And that information is readily available on the internet. And if you for people that couldn't write it down. Moderator, do we have time for more questions?
We've got time for one or two more questions. So let's go to Ruth from Mankato, who has a question about Governor Walz's shutdown orders. Ruth, you're live.
Thank you, Congressman. I really feel that this COVID-19 has been very, very poorly handled by Governor Walz and a lot of stuff throughout the country. I think that it's been very unfair as far as the way that the medical facility was forced to deal with so much of the COVID-19, and then you ended up having people like with cancer, the mental health areas, those type of people that weren't able to access any medical. So you had suicide rates going up, you had death rates going up from cancer from that, and then you have the other side of it when you have small businesses that they're not able to operate, that the dollars that are going in and out, the selection of who was able to be open, I think it was so politically navigated, and that the small business people, the people that are outside of the COVID-19 were basically left behind, and for some not to even survive. I think that through this whole ordeal that has been going on, the politics has come into play more than the common sense. You cannot have money people cannot be making money. You cannot have money going in to be paying out all these programs. Also, you can't constantly be taking when nothing can be going in. And so I don't know if there's going to be something more to be able to control some of these decisions that are being made on shutting down businesses, even as they're opening up at 50%. Absolutely, they cannot survive like that. And also with the medical being able to open their doors more for people to be able to be seen for their limitations and their needs.
Well, I appreciate your concerns. I've voiced almost all of those at one point or another. And in Minnesota, the emergency powers that were granted the governor on a temporary basis, I believe have been abused. And the legislature, the Senate, has passed several, I think 2 or 3 times, that they want to remove those powers. And the House refuses to do that. So you can't have a bill, and you can't do it unless you can get both the House and the Senate together. There is a lawsuit, I think several lawsuits pending. We'll see where they end up. But I would encourage the governor and the legislators to work together on these things and to come up with ideas that make sense for the people. I do believe that rural Minnesota has been treated unfairly because in much of rural Minnesota we didn't have the same types of problems that were seen in the Twin Cities. And then on top of that, more focus should have been on the long-term care facilities and less focus on people who are relatively healthy and young. But that's the way it is. I do agree with you that a lot of small businesses were needlessly bankrupt, and lives, for all intents and purposes, financially were ruined, and that's real sad. And it's really a problem in our border communities where the people just drove across the border and did the same shopping that they would have done in Minnesota. But moving forward, I hope that can be better, and that we can all work together in a more responsible fashion. Thank you for your call. Moderator, any more calls?
I think we have time for one more question. Let's go to Michael from Winona. Michael, you are live.
Thank you. Thank you, Congressman Hagedorn, for this call today. Just want to say that grateful that you're representing us, and looking forward to voting for you again in November. But I have a question. I just recently read that, in fact, just today, that Social Security looks like it's going to run out of money in 2029. And I recently retired, and looking forward to getting set up with Social Security here in a few years. But I guess I'm just kind of concerned, and you've already talked about Social Security today, but you know, those of us that have been paying into Social Security for our entire lives pretty much, and we see all these entitlement programs, but it seems like Social Security and Medicare are the first ones to get cut when the government runs out of money. So just wanted to let you know that, you know, we got folks out here that are concerned about that, and obviously you know that, but I just wanted to bring that up today.
Well, like I said before, I mean, a promise made is a promise kept, and the people that have been made these promises in Social Security and Medicare, we're going to make sure that they're followed through. But of a concern, I understand where you're coming from. You know, our nation is deeply in debt, And it hasn't just, it's been pretty much every presidency going back to Reagan on where we just spent too much money. The revenues increased, but we spent too much money. And as far as coronavirus is concerned, we had to do that. We're in an emergency situation, but we have to be very cognizant of the fact that the debt can cause serious problems to people as well if it unravels in such a way. And people, the working folks, are going to be, and the ones in retirement are going to be the ones most impacted. So I think that's perhaps the biggest threat to Social Security is the debt and our financial position in the United States. But whatever reforms are made, we have to make sure that those benefits that were promised are delivered, and that we have to do it in a bipartisan way. And until that happens, I think we shouldn't use it as a political issue. We should just keep trying to fulfill the promises made to the American people. So I appreciate your call, and I wish you well. And with that, I think we're at the end of our telephone town hall. I really appreciate you being on the call today, talking about several of the issues, being able to go through what's happening here with the whole coronavirus pandemic, the relief packages that we're considering in Congress, things to do with agriculture and our rural hospitals and our way of life in southern Minnesota. This is the 27th town hall that we've performed, and I enjoy them all. I enjoyed them all 21 in each of the counties. And so if anyone has any questions or needs that they'd like to contact our district office, if you have casework, if you're a veteran or Social Security recipient and you need some help, please give us a ring. Our phone number is 507-323-6090. I'll repeat that, 507-323-6090. And on the internet, you can find more information or to contact us that way at hagedorn.house.gov. hagedorn.house.gov. With that, thank you for being on the call. Wish you well, and let's stay connected as we move forward. Goodbye.